Okay, well, let's get going and folks can trickle in and join us as I kind of get us going here. So welcome everyone. I'm very pleased to welcome you to the first training session of the ESPC campaign. My name is Laura Carpenter, and I'm part of the Partnerships and Technical Assistance team within DOE's Office of State and Community Energy Programs. And so my team provides technical assistance and manages voluntary partner-driven initiatives that help states, local governments, K through 12 school districts, and other public sector partners troubleshoot issues, develop solutions, and maximize their energy and cost savings. So I have the pleasure of leading the ESPC campaign, which is SCEP's newest partnership and technical assistance initiative that supports these objectives. So this is the first training of the ESPC campaign program. So you will receive today an introduction to ESPC as well as an introduction to what the ESPC campaign training format looks like. And you can go ahead and advance the slide, Dub. So this is a closed door session. We are limiting participation in this training to public sector organizations that are either partners of the ESPC campaign currently or are considering becoming a partner. Moving forward, these trainings will be limited to signed partners of the campaign. So if you are still in the considering camp, I invite you to join at the end of today's session. We want this to be interactive. So please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat. You can just drop your name and where you're calling in from in the chat. We also have a Q&A feature. So if you look for that Q&A box, that's where you can put any questions that we will get to at the end of the session. And I'm happy to read those questions or you can come off mute. Hopefully you all have the ability to unmute yourselves or raise your hand in the yep, there's a raise hand feature on Zoom to be able to ask your question verbally. So you all should be automatically muted for now. We will be getting to the Q&A session at the end of this training session. And we are recording this training so that we can share it with folks who weren't able to make it today, but we will just do the training recording online and we will cut off the Q&A portion of the program so that you all can just feel free to ask anything that's on your mind. All right, next slide, please. So I've introduced myself already. I'm also joined here today by Dub Taylor. Dub is the Executive Director of the Energy Services Coalition, which is DOE's training partner for the ESPC campaign. And Dub has over 3 decades of experience helping to advance cost-effective clean energy technology and policy through his work in the public and private sectors, including as the former head of the Texas Energy Conservation Office. And in addition to serving as the executive director of the Energy Services Coalition, Dub is active on the boards of several state, local, and national organizations focused on clean energy technology deployment and financing. We are also joined by Chris Halpin, who is your trainer for today's session. Chris has almost 40 years of experience managing comprehensive energy management programs, and he has worked in engineering, management, and sales roles for several premier consulting firms and energy service companies. And he was one of the first ESPC owners representatives in the industry. Chris has guided more than $3 billion in projects that include ESPC, energy as a service, power purchase agreements, and commercial PACE projects for hundreds of federal, MUSH market, and private sector clients. Chris's background is in mechanical engineering. He has a degree in mechanical engineering from the University of South Florida, and he is also a registered professional engineer in Nevada. And he is certified by the Association of Energy Engineers as a certified energy manager and certified measurement and verification professional. He's been a U.S. Department of Energy FEMP certified ESPC project facilitator for over 20 years. And now he is also a consultant for the Energy Services Coalition, supporting this ESPC campaign. And with that, I will pass it over to you, Dub.
Thanks, Laura. So the overview, as you should have seen from the registration page today, is this really is a pretty high-level introduction, although it'll feel like a deeper dive into some sections about ESPC. So we're going to highlight how to use it, how it's applicable for state and local governments, how to facilitate investments through ESPC, and bring your whole team into the fold and advance learning for everyone. So the agenda today lays out like this. We'll wrap up introductions in just a moment. Then we'll launch and hand it over to Chris, and he'll dive into what is ESPC, kind of a basics, and then talk about leveraging along with ESPC. We'll go into some best practices, talk about a variety of different resources that are available to support your objectives in your local ESPC programs. Closing and next steps. There are a number of trainings, workshops, and other activities that are being facilitated through the ESPC campaign. We'll cover those, and then we should have time for Q&A at the end. And as Laura mentioned, please use the Q&A feature. I believe chat was disabled, should be back up, and we'll track those questions and try to get to everything by the end. And if not, we'll be able to stay over or follow up with you on any specific questions later. So who's the Energy Services Coalition? If you're not familiar, we are a national nonprofit, public-private partnership, organized really to have both sides working together to advance building energy efficiency, utilizing energy savings performance contracting. The ESC is a national organization, but really where the activity is, the energy is, where the rubber meets the road is with our local chapters. We have 30 plus states that have local chapters. Some super active, they meet regularly. Others are reforming now that sort of post-COVID, we have some new key players in place. So we welcome your participation in our state chapters, and we can send you more information about that later. And importantly, for the ESPC campaign, we are partnering with Laura and her team to provide a lot of the technical support and training, including webinars like this. So with that, we'll move over to the main presentation, and we'll start it off with a couple of quick polls just to get a sense of who all is on and sort of your level of understanding. So the first poll is here. So please take a look at this and answer the questions. So how familiar are you with ESPC? This is multiple choice. You can actually answer twice if you think you have a basic understanding and you've also worked on projects. And then the second question is, what is your role, either current or planned, in implementing an ESPC project? Again, you can answer multiple choices here, and we'll let this poll go for a few more seconds. Okay, so I think we've got good participation here. So we'll end here, and let's take a look at the results. So a pretty balanced mix here. So first I'm hearing of it, about a quarter, basic understanding, about another third or so, planning the first project, 20%, and then some other folks who are on who've had experience with projects. And great to see that so many of you are project leads, or that you're in a position to coordinate the project. This is a webinar for you. We're going to dive deep into all the things that are meaningful in project execution. Some of these other elements of legal review, that's an important element as well. Finance, obviously, and then maintenance. So thank you for that. At the end of the webinar today, we'll do another poll, more open-ended questions that we won't be sharing. We would like your candid feedback, and you'll see that toward the end. So with that, I'm going to close this poll and turn it over to Chris to take it from here. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Dub. And thank you, Laura, for allowing me to help out on this great first ESPC campaign training. So some of you are going to feel like this is a bit of drinking from a fire hose, and I apologize for that ahead of time, but it's always hard to do a sort of a high-level overview of a relatively complex subject. So you'll note in a couple of slides before, there was that little icon that looked like sort of a light bulb with some gears around it. That's basically telling you that there's going to be more on these topics in coming trainings over the next 3 to 6 months. So don't feel like, oh my God, what did they say? I I wish I had captured that somewhere, right? So we'll be able to get to that. So what is energy savings performance contracting, right? There's lots of different definitions for it out there. Here's one that DOE came up with originally in 1999. It's actually been in use since the early 80s. One of the ESCOs I worked for back in the 90s was one of the pioneers of this in 1982, doing ESPCs in hospitals. I came up with this middle definition myself just over the years, having worked in this both as on the ESCO side in the 90s and then as an owner's rep since 2000, which basically says that, it's a financial mechanism primarily that helps you pay for today's facility upgrades with tomorrow's energy savings without tapping into your capital budget, right? Which is a precious resource you really should be using for things that don't have truly like economic paybacks to them, right? And done properly, it has the performance of a hedge fund with the risk of a T-bill. And this is a phrase I borrowed from an old EPA tagline. But it's really how these things work, right? You can get really good returns on these with very little risk if it's done properly. And at the heart of it, it's really design build contracting. It's sophisticated design build contracting with the focus on guaranteed savings. So it's like fixed price or guaranteed maximum price, guaranteed minimum savings, right? Which you don't get ever really in the public marketplace. You get price, and then there's change orders, and then you get, let's hope this all works, right? And you have 1 year to get the warranty stuff done. And then that usually ends up with you chasing folks around to get things fixed and repaired. So next slide. So from a budget point of view, right, this is really cost neutral. It's one of the beauties of this. I wish I'd had access to this when I started this in 1985. I was doing energy audits and design work and construction administration for schools and hospitals, right? Through the old Exxon Overcharge Money Fund that started all of these state energy offices that a lot of you work at now. And by the mid to late 80s, that money was drying up. And DOE was paying half the cost of all of these upgrades that we would design, but more than half of the folks still couldn't come up with the 50% match. So a lot of work was done, but not a lot to show for it. So performance contracting is a way to really implement all of this work that can be identified. And these three bars show snapshots, right? Before your contract starts, you have your existing energy and operations budget, right? Electricity, gas, water. You're paying people to keep your ancient air conditioning and heating systems running. During the ESPC contract, right? You've hired a contractor, you've hired owners reps, legal representation, all that. They develop the project, implement it. The financing starts the repayment stream, and that comes out of the budget that you would usually be sending to your electric company and your gas company, and these contractors are taking care of ancient equipment with a small net positive cash flow, right? Then once it's completed and you get into the ESPC contract, you run out the 15 years, whatever the case may be, the rest of the savings will go to you and back to your budget, right? So then that's where you really see huge cost reductions. But during this whole process, it's pretty much cash neutral. So there's no need to like go for a referendum and ask for $30 million like you have to do for a new school or firehouses or whatever. Next slide. So why would you do something like this, right? And we have some, pictures over here on the right, but a lot of it is you lack available capital, right? This has never been the same since the big economic downturn 10, 12 years ago. Revenues have never come back to really fund capital the way it needs to be. Lots of failing facility and system infrastructure, energy costs just keep rising. This can act as a hedge against that because it reduces your overall use, and you can actually change your building profile or your facilities profile and how you use it and when. Can help you meet energy reduction goals, support decarbonization and electrification if you live in states that have those goals. One of the best things for this, about this for me, is it creates lots and lots of local jobs, right? The construction and the design and commissioning, all that goes around this creates thousands of local jobs every year. It can really help attack resilience. As we're seeing now with crazy weather all over the place at all times of the year, this can really help you protect your assets, strengthening them and protecting critical assets. And then it really allows you to leverage for maximum value. So instead of like just doing a lighting job or just doing a solar job or just fixing that flooded out mechanical room you see in the bottom, you can do this all together at once in a performance contract. And lastly, integrating this Internet of Things everyone's heard about by now into your facilities. Next slide. So basically taking where our buildings currently, right? And COVID showed this to everybody, right? With the state of American HVAC, we have like flip phones from 20 years ago, right? What we want to do through this is turn it into a smartphone, right? And that's an analogy I think everybody can understand, even if you don't really have a lot of understanding of building systems. That is where ESPC can take your building facilities infrastructure. Next slide. So some of the features and benefits, right? And I'm not going to read all these. You can read these afterwards, but it really gives you an ability to do a deep dive. This investment grade art is a deep dive by professionals into all your building systems. You know, if you have street lighting, whatever the case may be, water, wastewater plants, this can be done for any sort of public asset and nonprofit asset. You get turnkey installation, which is, you know, one company does virtually all this for you. It's guaranteed energy savings. Like I said before, it's energy savings with attached costs, and we'll cover those in another follow-up training. And you can really use the ESPC to mitigate your risks, right? So when you do this through a regular design bid build, all the risk is primarily on you, right? You hire the architect, you hire the engineer. Hopefully they basically display what you want to have done. The contractor gives you the bid, and then the change order start, right? Because they find mistakes in the drawings and all that. There's none of that with ESPC, right? There's no change orders unless you direct the ESCO to change something. There's no change order. So it's beautiful from that point of view. It also allows you to do open book pricing, which is one of my favorite things about all of this, as opposed to like, here's the price. You get to see what were their subcontractor costs, what are their commissioning costs, and all that, and it built up in an open book pricing basis. So it really is fabulous for public agencies. It allows you to really take waste in your energy budget. One of my colleagues calls it energy efficiency equity, right? And I just learned that a few years ago. I love that term. It allows you to unlock that equity in your buildings because most buildings are wasting 30% of the energy that comes into them, right? On average. You can turn that into a monetization stream for your buildings and reinvest them there instead of giving them to your treasury outfit. So you can take that money that you're avoiding, right? It's not necessarily savings, you're really avoiding those costs. And you're not having to add any more debt, right? Again, like I said before, there's no referendum, no extra bonds that needs to get done on top of your current tax base. You're taking money you're already spending, you're reallocating it. You're reallocating it into things like new HVAC, windows, doors, controls, lighting. A lot of it these days, where solar used to be too expensive to be included in these deals, now you can include them as just another measure, right? And battery storage, that's really a lifesaver. In the hotel I'm in today, they had a power outage this morning. And I'm like, oh my God, I could do my webinar from here. Brand new hotel, right? And even EV fleet conversion. So this can be used for a lot of different things. It helps pay the financing costs and non-energy facility enhancements. I've seen everything from trash compaction in prisons, taking liquid soap, turn it to foam soap, saved tens of thousands of dollars. Who would have thought? And even sustainability projects like, helping with recycling, education, and so on. Next slide. Next slide. So this is a real eye chart, right? I'm not going to go through this whole thing. So, but basically DOE looks at performance contracting in 5 phases, right? There's the first one is sort of pre-qualification and planning. This is where you want to kind of get started and go, do I have facilities that really work for this? One of the best ways to get started is to hire an owner's rep. It's just like you wouldn't think about hiring, building a new building, let's hire an architect to come up with sort of the program and really kind of what do we need. And sometimes you even hire another architect to do the full design. With this, hire an owner's rep early, like what I used to do. If you get an owner's rep in early, they can help you figure out which buildings make the most sense. Do we want to attack street lighting? Help you come up with all the ideas that are going to be necessary to get your folks on board with this. If you're mainly technical leads on this call, they help you talk to finance, legal, budget, pretty much everybody, all the authorities having jurisdiction as well. And then get everybody on board, move to the next phase, which is hiring your ESCO, selecting and hiring your ESCO, right? The biggest takeaway from this is developing the RFP. And there's a whole art to that. We're going to do a whole training session just probably on this section. And the main takeaway is select a partner, not a project, right? And I'll talk about this some more later on. The next phase is going into IJ development, right? You selected them. Now they're going to do this deep dive into your facilities and your energy bills and all this. They're going to develop an investment grade audit with interim milestones like 30%, 60%, 90%, instead of just showing up at a full 1,000-page report, everyone's going, oh my God, I didn't have any input into this. Like you wouldn't do that for a new building, right? You always have programming, schematic, design development, construction drawings, right? The owner always gets interim milestone decision-making, right? That's key to success with this. You also at the same time start developing the performance contract, right? The ESPC. There's the performance contract in ESPC. And this is the legal document that is the only thing you have to be able to hold the ESCO's feet to the fire, right? They're your partner in this, but at the end of the day, you always need a contract to make sure they're doing what they're supposed to be doing and you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. Then once you get towards the end of this, you select your financial provider through an RFP, and you get on to the next phase, which is implementation. This is where it starts to look a little more like a regular design and construction project. They're going to finish up the design. They get all this fixed pricing for the IGA using up to 30% design for most of the measures. So that's a big risk off your shoulders. They're taking that risk of giving you a fixed price based on partially complete drawings. They do all the design. They start installing the measures. One of the real differences and distinctions of performance contracting and regular construction is this is real commissioning. A lot of what happens today, unfortunately, is still what I call faux commissioning. A couple of guys with some checklists and they're checking boxes, and it's not really commissioning, right? This is more like what you see if you're ever in the Navy and you commission a ship, and before it ever goes out to do deployments, that's what this commissioning resembles. Then there's post-installation M&V activity. So both during the development and the implementation, M&V is going on. It's a process, right? It's not a point in time. I'll talk more about that later. And we always want to get your folks involved in witnessing some of these things, right? We'll talk about that some more later. The last one here is the performance period. So you complete the project, you get into performance. This is where the things are really supposed to start saving the energy and start saving you money because you start to make the loan repayments, right? Usually 30 to 60 days after that, this is when the money starts to go back out the door. And every year, usually 60 days after that, 1-year anniversary, 2-year anniversary, and so on, the ESCO needs to provide you with an M&V report on the verified savings. And that's, again, where another opportunity where your owner's rep can help you. Next slide. So this one. So the roles and responsibilities in performance contracting are different than standard design bid build. As you'd imagine, I find them a lot better because it ends up putting virtually everybody on the same side of the table, right? Because you're there sort of co-authoring solutions with the ESCO, and they're your major partner in this. You have one major partner is the ESCO. That's the one that's getting the 10 million, 50 million, $100 million in costs. And you've got your owner's rep as sort of a minor partner, but like your risk mitigation agent, and then your financier who's providing the money, and then you need to repay them with that over time. The ESCO brings a lot of innovation, creativity, and has skin in the game. Again, very unlike normal design bid build. Once that 1-year warranty period is over, good luck. They're on to the next project, right? With performance contracting, they have got to guarantee those savings, the performance of the equipment and the savings over this 15, 20-year time frame. So they end up sitting with you and designing stuff that's high quality, really good high quality construction, real commissioning, all of that. They want this to work. They don't want callbacks. It's the last thing they want, right? So you end up actually getting much better quality construction with this than you get with virtually any other tool you have in your toolbox, right? And they're guaranteeing these things, right? And you're making construction payments from the financier directly to them. So the owners up, like I said, they help you. The nice thing about the way this is procured, and if you're a procurement person in this, you'll really love this. You get out of the ESCO procurement what would take you 3 to 4 procurements to do yourself: energy auditor, engineer, cost estimator, and a builder, pretty much in one fell swoop. Also in standard design bid build, it could take 3 to 5 years to get the appropriations to do this. DOE did a study on this because there are all these people screaming in the military and others that, hey, we just want to follow our normal project path. And they felt like they got a better value because PC was more expensive. And it turns out normal construction is more expensive than this because of the opportunity cost, right? And your owner's rep provide you with independent education, analysis, and validation. This is key. And we're going to have a whole training just on that. Next. So again, we're going to have a whole training just on M&V, right? This is really the crux of performance contracting and what sets it apart from normal construction, where there's no real, skin in the game. Like I said, that term for a contractor, In this, there is, and it's not a point in time, like I mentioned, it's a process, right? You're measuring the performance and verifying savings. And it's on the ESCO to do that with your oversight and your owner's rep oversight. Because honestly, whether this works or not, the bank wants its money. I jokingly tell people it's like when your teenager wrecks your car, you still have to keep making the payments on your loan, right? They don't care whether it's sitting in the shop for 2 months, right? So what we found over time, we've been brought in to do forensic analysis and so on, and most of the problems with the SPC projects are bad M&V, right? The owner didn't understand what they were buying, and a lot of stuff is stipulated, and so that doesn't happen in a well thought through project. There's a lot of measurement that gets done. And there's a great link here, and you'll see there's a lot of live links in this presentation. We're not going to go through them. We don't have time. But this one is a great one about how to do successful M&V. And lastly, this is contractual savings, right? So regardless of what your electric bills and all that say, the actual savings are what's in the contract and what gets measured, right? And again, that's fodder for another day. Next slide. So how can state energy offices help you? If you're at a state, right, you usually have access to your state energy office or something along the lines. Whoever's running your ESPC programs, sometimes it's like Department of General Services or Department of Public Works or the Sustainability Department. Again, another link where you can go to that link and it tells you what the enabling legislation is in your state, because all of these virtually require new laws because you're superseding existing design, bid, build, procurement law. Right? What it helps you do is avoid this term that I learned about 15 years ago. I can't claim this one, but what you see all the time, if you're in regular public construction, like I talked about earlier, design, bid, change order, contractors trying to save money behind your back, all that stuff. And you end up with the cheapest available technology necessary to avoid prosecution, right? And it's real. It's funny, but it's real. It's sad. This is what happens, right? You avoid all of that because of this co-authoring skin in the game thing I'm talking about. So you can start off by contacting your SEO or whoever the peer agency is, and they can help you with everything from training, template documents, sometimes detailed technical assistance, mostly high-level technical assistance. Your owner's rep can provide you with really detailed technical assistance. I used to basically require ESCOs submit like whatever their energy savings calcs were in their native electronic format. No PDF files that you're trying to look at and see if the math is right or not, right? Lists of pre-qualified ESCOs and owners reps so that you don't have to go and try to qualify all this yourself. They can help you with financing options and RPs. And also one of the most important things about this, and I've done work for probably 7 or 8 states, is helping you get approval from whatever the authorities having jurisdictions are. And some of them you have to go to this board, then that board, then that board. And if you screw up one thing with one of the boards, you go back to the end of the line again, right? Which isn't any fun. Also, NASEO, the National Association of State Energy Officials, virtually every state's a part of this, has some great ESPC resources. Next. So if you're a local government, right, you can do projects yourself. In many states, you can get help from the state energy office. If not, continue to take these trainings, and we're going to really get you spun up on how to do one of these projects over the next 6 months or so. And definitely get yourself an owner's rep, right? They're really worth the weight in gold. If you're a larger local government, you can help some of your smaller counterparts, which we're starting to see a lot more of now because of the way some of the federal money is coming out. The state's getting money, some of the bigger cities are getting money, but everyone else is sort of having to, get it from those 2 sources. So there's a great case study here. Again, we're not going to go into it, where Hamilton County, which is basically the county surrounding Cincinnati, Ohio, got 3 or 4 other small, like tiny municipalities around them that could never have done this themselves, right? It has to be at least $500,000 to $1 million to get an ESCO to even look at one of these, especially these days. Everybody's busy, right? So this is a great way that you can both help yourself and help other local governments work together to do this. You can also provide larger pools of funding because you have better borrowing capacity. I've seen this with really big cities. Borrow a large chunk of money, disseminate it out to the different departments within the city, even some of the enterprise departments through the city who are, the airport and water treatment plant and all that. They really can mix and match the funding. And there's a great DOE guide on small projects here. Next. So I'm glad to hear most of you here are project leads. So if you're a facilities manager or director of construction, sustainability, whatever it is, and I've already said some of this, this is how you can get started, right? Again, contact your state energy office, see what help you can get, identify these buildings and other assets you have that are expensive to operate. Everyone has deferred maintenance issues. It's a matter of how many million or how many billion you have that really require some renewal, right? So some of this stuff just needs to be replaced because it's old, has nothing to do with energy savings. And sometimes it's a mixture of both. Like I said, get an owner's rep, assemble an internal ESPC team. Before you go out to the market, you want everybody on your team, there's gonna be a whole slide about this, on board. And we're gonna talk about that some more. And really discuss this with everybody, right? And there may be some overarching goals you have, whether it's reducing costs, you have to reduce your emissions, there's net zero targets, you want to create so many local jobs because the economy still hasn't come back in your area. ESPC is a great solution for all of these. And secure commitment from everybody in your team, especially anyone with veto power, right? Anyone that can stop this dead in its tracks needs to be brought inside the tent. Then before you issue your first RFQ or RFP, you want to get all this done. Next. So you're assembling your team, right? Again, this is another real eye chart. I'm not going to read all this. It's something good to look at afterwards. So the energy champion is probably going to be those of you on the phone or somebody you're going to delegate this to, right? This is the person that's, ringleader, champion, all these different names. They're also the official cat herder. Honestly, what ends up happening here is that they need to get all of these other folks on board with this. That includes legal, finance, and procurement. Here on the right side, they're the ones that have the veto power, right? Honestly, everyone else that are sort of service oriented, and legal, finance, and procurement make the decisions on getting the money or not, getting the legal requirements met or not, or being able to put this out for procurement or not, right? So you want to get them on board. The maintenance folks, right? I'm first generation. My parents, poor Irish immigrants, right? And most of my family are laborers and tradesmen. And I can tell you, unless you get these folks or keep your buildings running and maintained on a daily basis, unless you get them involved in this from the beginning, it will be very difficult to make this go. And most normal design and construction projects, they're completely ignored. I've gotten some really colorful words from my uncles and cousins about that over the years. So you want to make sure they're on board. And if they are, these projects will sing, right? And you can also help them get better technology to do their job better, right? Which is something that's very hard to do otherwise. And of course, construction, they're going to be intimately involved in a project like this, and oversight. Whether you have folks inside that can do this or hiring outside experts, you definitely want some of this. And lastly, these approving authorities. Again, what I used to do for states is before we even get to detailed audits, we'd go and preview this with like state construction offices, with the fire marshals and all those, because they can stop your project dead, right? Give them, tell them what you're going to tell them, tell them what you told them. Next. So selecting the partners, right? Again, I probably already talked about half of this, but again, owners reps, one of the first things you want to do. It's not easy to find them, right? It's a real niche specialty. DOE is assembling model procurement and contract docs to do this. That's going to be out in a few months. I'm actually the one putting it together for them. They're paid fee for service, just like most engineering firms. So for the first, 6-9 months, you're paying them out of your utility budget, professional services budget, whatever. But then when you go to borrow the money to pay the ESCO, say it's, 10 million for the ESCO project, you borrow another 100, 200,000, whatever the number is. And then you can take those proceeds, reimburse yourself for what you've spent to date, and then keep that money in account to pay the owner's rep as you go through the construction and acceptance period. And then lastly, there's this link to this white paper I wrote for DOE about 8 years ago about using owner's reps. So the energy services company decision, it is the biggest decision you're going to make, is selecting your partner in this. If you have a pre-qualified list of providers, that's great. We usually recommend you take that list instead of just picking somebody. At least put out sort of a notice of opportunity. Here's what we'd like to do. Please tell us what you think you could do to help us, right? And DOE's got some template docs that are coming out here shortly. You want to do a detailed review of the ESCO proposal submissions. And please don't ask them to do free energy audits. That results in nothing but fairy tales, right? Until you do the detailed IGA, that's the only thing you can really bank on. That's why it's called investment grade audit. Always shortlist and interview the top 3 firms in person if you can, right? Stuff like this is great, but when you get down to it, they're going to be in your buildings for years. And you want them to be people you can build trust and rapport with. And the only way to do that, at least for me, I'm old school, is in person, right? So, walking to the coffee machine together and talking and that kind of thing, really building relationships. You want to be able to understand the markups and indicative pricing, ask lots of questions, and at the end, really get a good comfort going between you and that staff, not the closer who flies in the expensive suit, the folks who are there during the interviews. Lastly, the financier. This is probably one of the easier decisions you're going to make, because either you already have a financial advisor or you have someone that can help you do this in-house, right? Your own CFO and so on. And there's probably some likely suspects you already use for financing, right? But similar to the ESCO, you put an RFP, terms, conditions, so on. You want to bring them on when you're about 50% through with the IGA and get indicative rates for them as the ESCO is putting together the final cash flow before you go for approval. Next slide. Okay, some of the best practices around this, and again, there's a lot of words here, but I've already talked about some of these. One of the things about owner's rep is try to get somebody that's not working for ESCOs. That can create a conflict of interest. I've seen it. Talk about and communicate your objectives and challenges early and often, right? Educate everybody. We've already talked about that, from the boiler room to the C-suite. Talked about the O&M staff. You want to consider really leading edge, not bleeding edge technologies. Leave that to like Google, Facebook, and IBM. For brand new technologies, you're serving the public primarily, right? You want stuff that's absolutely going to work. If you can't integrate building occupants, especially if you're in education, getting young kids involved in this, getting high school and college students involved in this stuff, it creates a marketable skill on their resume that's almost irreplaceable, right? And please don't tell ESCOs we want this done, that done, that done, that done, right? You let them use their creativity. Give them ideas. Here's the things we're thinking about, but let them tell you in their own words what they think will work. And then you work this out together, right? Because they can be super creative and innovative. On the procurement side, again, I already talked about most of this. Standardized documents. It's all about qualification and past performance and who's the staff. I've already talked this maximum % of hard costs, so you can get indicative pricing, so that you're not going to get a price for the job. It's not going to get $10 million, but it's going to be like 1%, 2%, 3%. And that's something you can compare on a table, easy enough. And like I said before, don't have them doing for energy audits. And then before they actually start the IGA, and again, we have template documents for this, you're going to negotiate an IGA agreement with some help from your owner's rep, so that you know how long it's going to take, what's the scope, what are the deliverables, and what's the walkaway fee, right? Because the ESCOs are not in the business of doing energy audits to make money. They always lose money on it, right? That's just their way to get to do the construction. Next. So once you get into the implementation period, using comment response resolution documents is something that DOE pioneered like 20 years ago when I was first starting as a project facilitator. It allows you to have a paper trail, right? And if you're some of the more sophisticated construction folks know about this, where you can like track projects through, there's I forget the name, but there's a bunch of these, but comment response resolution gives you the ability to make these interim changes, see why you made those decisions you made, especially if there's turnover, right? It really helps in the long run. Do lots of regular meetings, weekly, bi-weekly. It really promotes integration and incremental decision-making. Try to keep the same people on the whole way through to make sense. Co-authoring, no surprises at the end. We talked about this already. Verifying equipment meets the specs in the IGA. And again, I talked about commissioning. It is so absolutely important, and making sure that you folks are witnessing this. It really helps make these things work successfully, right? And getting thorough training. Again, in normal construction, the training is honestly a joke, right? They hand you the binders and the keys on the way out, and then you're left to try to read through these things. Here, there's like real in-class and hands-on training with recording, so that as part of new onboarding, they watch the safety videos, the harassment videos, all that, and the ESPC videos. For M&V, there's tons of these. I'm not going to read through these, but we're going to get into all of this when we do the M&V session. Next. So you've got this great project. There's a lot of documentation. How do you keep track of it, right? What you want to save everything, right? And we all know what it's like trying to save documents today. It's up in the cloud. It's on my desktop. It's in the servers. You lose connection. What do we do? So thankfully, I wish we had this years ago when I was doing this full time. The Department of Energy hired Lawrence Berkeley Lab to create this eProject Express, right? It's a free online, cloud-based service that allows you to save everything, and you can run these amazing reports and all of this with it. It is such an amazing tool. And there's going to be a training session on this in August, I believe, but we'll talk about that more later. Next. So leverage federal funding, right? This is the biggest thing to hit this industry since I've been at this, right? Since the Exxon overcharge money went to Department of Energy in the early 80s, this is the biggest by far. Like ARA funding, 12 years ago, this is 10x or more of that, right? I'm not going to go through all this. There was a webinar about this a month or two ago. I'm sure a lot of you saw that. These links are all very helpful. The real takeaway for this is that any public agency or nonprofit can get a minimum of 30% of all their solar, battery storage, heat pumps, clean vehicles, charging stations, all that paid for cash by the IRS, but it's done in arrears. So you still have to plan for paying for this whole project. Then a year or two later, you get the money, right? So that's a whole nother topic. The thing about this for me, it's great to have this funding, but you need to be able to get the rest of it right too. Some of this funding can be used to pay for technical and planning assistance, like hiring legal, right? Hiring bond counsel, hiring owners reps. That can all be used for this sort of stuff. And here's some great guidebooks and the links at the bottom. Next. Resources. Again, a lot of great links here. I tested all of them. They all work. Again, so on your own time, you can run through this. This PCNRC one is great. It has a whole course on how to be an owner's rep, right? So even if you're the project lead, it would be really helpful to take this one that's right in the middle. You'll learn a ton. And that's it for me. Thank you all so much.
Not quite it for you, Chris, but yeah, I do want to step in here and do a brief overview of the ESPC campaign. We'll not do this on every training. I know several of you on the call are already partners. But again, just for those who are not have joined today's training, this is our technical assistance and partnership initiative through which we are working with states, local governments, schools, healthcare centers, and others, universities, to really help you expand and enhance the use of performance contracting to achieve your objectives. And collectively, we're hoping to reach $1 billion in measured and verified savings under this initiative. So through this program, you can receive access to DOE technical assistance, such as this training, as well as really have the opportunity to share your own experiences and lessons learned and best practices with one another. We really want to work with you to demonstrate the impact of these projects and showcase your achievements by integrating you into our webinars and other activities, and working with you to develop case studies and other implementation models that will help others and help the market move forward. So we were offering training such as this one, which I understand that we're having some issues with letting you unmute yourself today. So please bear with us. We will make it more interactive going forward, as well as public-facing webinars, peer exchange opportunities, and office hours, time that you can set aside to really dig in with a technical expert. So all of these opportunities will be advertised in the ESPC campaign newsletter. So please feel free to use that QR code or reach out after this to get in touch and sign up if you haven't already. Okay, I'm going to hand it back to you, Chris.
All right. All right, closing thoughts. Next slide. So that was a lot of information. I know. Okay. And this all sounds, I'm sure, like, oh my God, there's a lot to this. I didn't realize there was so much to this. And those of you that have done these projects before know, right? There's a lot to this. But boy, you do this the way it should be done, right? Design build is complicated too, but it's a lot better than build design, right? That's how I look at this. But this has been going on since the early 80s, right? State of Washington, state of Ohio had been doing this literally since the early 80s. The U.S. Department of Energy started this through EPAC 92, right? And that really started getting going in the mid 90s. And there's over 7 billion a year of this done every single year. And it's growing every single year. There's these national model instruments. We're going to create this program in a box. There's a lot of resources out there. And there's lots and lots of people here to provide you with help. And this ESPC campaign is wonderful. I've been doing this a long time. This is the first time I've really seen DOE and this office dive in like this, right? It's been great. And Laura's been doing a great job with this. And there's more and more of these third-party owners reps out there, right? We need to grow this business. Just like commissioning agents 20, 25 years ago, people back then were like, I don't know, that's expensive. And now you wouldn't build a building without a commissioning agent. It's unheard of virtually, right? So that's where we're going with this. And next slide. So success awaits, right? The benefits, I already talked about a lot of this: saving energy, environmental stewardship, creating jobs, right? Creating jobs is so key to this, and good, well-paying jobs. Creating jobs for young people who are, coming out of college or coming out of trade school looking for things is a perfect place. And for me, resiliency is absolutely key. That this is one of the best ways to improve the resilience of your facilities. And for me, I talked about, just touched on it earlier, healthier learning and working environments. COVID showed us the terrible condition our schools are in from an HVAC point of view. I mean, it really peeled back the Band-Aid, right? And this is a way to solve that. And it really can help you reach many targets simultaneously. Next. So as Laura said, there's going to be additional trainings. We've got this Getting Started with eProject Express, utilizing owners reps. We talked about these template documents. This is going to be great. I mean, to be able to walk you through this really is going to take a lot of the unknowns out of doing one of these. Developing an M&V plan. We're going to create literally like the yellow brick road to success of how to do a project. There's some great case studies. Doug was telling me about this one a few days ago. The Texas GSA did 6 phases of ESPC, and it's won beautifully. ESPC in higher ed, we're going to have one, applying lessons learned. And then tips and tricks. That's where these best practices I covered in like 3.5 minutes. We're going to do an hour just on that, right? And we could do a half a day just on that. But this is just a taste of what's to come. Next. And here we are.